let them talk.
Hey, welcome to Let 'Em Talk. I'm Paul DiRienzo, straightening myself up here, and welcome to a great show. We really have an interesting show today. My guest, Alexander Rubinstein, who's going to talk about an article. He's a writer, a journalist, and he's going to talk about an article that he wrote on, you might have heard about it. It's this practice, it's where a chicken, it's a religious practice. It's a religious practice where a chicken is swung over the heads of a religious leader and then smashed down on the ground and killed. And this has been, it's 2,000 years old, I'm told. It's extremely controversial, but also there's a strong desire to protect it as an expression of religiosity and all of that. And as such, I just was fascinated by the article, and Alexander's interested in it, and he loves animals, and well, he'll tell his own position on the whole thing. And so we're going to actually open the phones later on and give folks a chance to call in, because I know both animal rights and also religious freedom are both such interesting subjects and such emotional subjects that we wanted to give people an opportunity to say their piece about what we're talking about. So we're going to open the phones a little bit later on. We'll show some pictures. I toned down the pictures. Don't worry, it's not the bloodiest of the pictures. Some of them were pretty bad, but we're going to stick to some basic shots that give you the idea what's going on without it being too terrible. So Alexander Rubinstein, welcome to Let Them Talk.
Hello. So first I want to correct you real quick.
Please do.
They're not, the chickens there are not swung over the head of a religious leader. They're swung over the head 3 times of everyone participating in the ritual, which is people from all over the world. They come to Brooklyn to practice this ritual.
Okay, great. So I didn't even know that. So, and that shows you that we don't get the right information, because I think I just heard this or that, and it's by rumor, word of mouth. So tell us about the article you wrote, Alexander, and what led you to write it.
Okay, so I mean, I started writing I was informed about the ritual actually just a few days prior to it.
What's it called?
It's called Kaporos, is what it's called, or Kaporot. It's 2 different names.
Or what? I'm sorry.
Kaporot with a T instead of an S. It depends on which Jewish group is practicing it.
And what does that mean? Does it have?
It means it comes from the Jewish word for atonement, which is also used for Yom Kippur.
Oh, I see.
Yeah,
okay.
The holiest day in the Jewish calendar.
Which we just had recently.
That was just recently, yeah.
Right.
Kaporos takes place in the days prior to Yom Kippur, after Rosh Hashanah.
Okay, so where... tell us a little bit about yourself in this article. What led you to write this article about it?
Well, my editor told me about the ritual.
What's the magazine?
Well, it was published on the Italian newspaper La Voce de New York. It's also published on my website, wordout.nyc.
Okay.
So you can find it on either of those.
And what's the name of the article?
It's called To Kaporos or Not Kaporos? That is the question.
Okay, to Kaporos or not Kaporos? That is the question.
Yeah.
Great. All right, so Alexander, so you then how did you do the research for this article?
Well, there's this group called the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos, and they had filed a lawsuit in July against the city, the different city departments, the health department, the sanitation department, the police department, as well as a few congregations and rabbis. And that happened in July. So they've been, they have a lot of press materials, and there's information all over the web, different sources, the Gothamists, they all cover it.
I see. And okay, so you decided to, did you actually go?
I did go, yes. I actually...
How did you get in? Did you need an invitation, or you just
You did not. So what happened was I got off the train in Crown Heights. It happens in Williamsburg Borough Park in Crown Heights, which are the main Hasidic areas in Brooklyn. And I got off in Crown Heights off the Kingston Avenue stop, and immediately I got off and I just saw hundreds of Hasidic Jews right outside the synagogue. So I was standing there for a little while, and one of them came up to me, and I was dressed just like this, and he said, "Are you Jewish?" I said, "Yes, I'm Jewish." He said, "Is your mother Jewish?" Which is, necessary to begin the important question, yes. So I said yes, and so he invited me in. It was just before sundown. I went in. He gave me a kipputz or a yarmulke. He gave me a tefillin, which they wrap and had me repeat a prayer. I don't know any of these things.
Right.
But he did that, and then I left, and a couple streets down, there was the ritual, and I had my yarmulke on still. And
so you like infiltrated?
I did.
It was like an infiltration.
A little bit like an infiltration, yeah. Because actually, I'm not the only one to experience this, but many of the other sources that reported on this said that, you know, as you pulled out your camera to document anything, the Hasidic youth, the teenagers, would push you or jump in front of you to prevent your documentation. So that happened quite a bit, yeah.
I see.
Even with the kaputs on.
Oh, so you had some trouble taking pictures?
Much trouble, yeah, quite a bit. Yeah.
Every time you pull out a camera, somebody would just get in your way,
push me, or walk in front of me, or anything. I did have the kaputs on, so you know, that's
a little intertribal warfare there, right? Okay.
Sure, yeah.
Right. So and let's tell a little bit about yourself. Tell me a little bit about your background to all of this. How long have you been a writer? When did you decide to be a writer?
Oh, shoot. I have been a writer probably since I was in elementary school. I am first published in December of last year. November of last year, I apologize.
And what's your goal? Like, do you write for newspapers, magazines?
I've written for two websites. One was based out of Los Angeles. It's an aggregator. And then the other one is the Italian newspaper. And I'm also starting a project right now.
Interesting. So you're at the beginning of a career right now.
Very
and this is a very interesting subject to choose. So what is it that makes this controversial? I mean, obviously, if people are trying to jostle you and push you, why is this controversial?
Well, it's a practice that has to do very much with religious freedom, religious liberty, which is, you know, a big issue right now all over the states. We have states passing laws, and it's just, you know, at the forefront of the national conversation. And then on the other hand, there's the issue of animal cruelty. So I think the combination of this is very interesting. And also, what particularly drew me to this story was it's such a biblical practice to happen in Brooklyn on the street and just in public. It's very a little bit bizarre.
Okay, let's tell me a little. Let's show the picture. We have a photograph. Let's show a photograph, and while the photograph is up, we're going to continue talking and maybe describe. Here's a photograph here. So, what exactly is going on here? These are pictures you took?
Yeah, I took those. The editor of La Voce was also in attendance. She took pictures as well.
Right, and what's going on here?
So they hold the chickens by their wings, and they're reading a prayer. So the prayer says something along the lines of, this is my atonement, this is my exchange. The idea is that they're giving their sins from the past year to the chicken. And in place of God wanting to kill them, the Jew, they killed the chicken. And it's a sacrifice. So
don't laugh.
So that's the idea. They don't actually kill the chickens themselves. The chickens are bought for $12 in the back on the street, and then
That's how much a live chicken goes for?
$12, yes.
But that seems less than a chicken in the supermarket.
That's right. Yeah. Well, they're ordered from farms by the rabbis. Yes.
I see. Interesting. So anybody who wants to do this, or is it a set number of people who do it? How do you go? Who are the people who actually decide to actually do this ceremony?
It's the ultra-Orthodox Jews. Many of them come from all over the world to do this.
Really?
To New York City to do this ritual. Crown Heights is considered a holy place in Hasidic Judaism. In fact, the synagogue that I went to was the holy place. It was founded by a rabbi Schneerson or something like
sure,
that.
Right.
Yeah.
He was around. I remember his day. He was around in the 90s and 80s and 90s. It was a big time.
It was before my time, but yes.
Right. Right. Interesting. So what happens actually? So they read a prayer, and the prayer is an atonement prayer that shifts all the sins to the chicken, the poor chicken, and who's done nothing to deserve this in the minds of an animal rights person,
sure,
right? Animal cruelty person. And then what do they do with that chicken?
Well, they swing it over their head or their child's head 3 times, and it's given to they build a kind of a makeshift slaughterhouse with wood and light fixtures, and they slaughter the chickens by slicing the throat.
And so then after they do it around their heads?
After that, yes. Then they slice the neck,
So it's alive when they put it
That's
over
right.
their heads like 3 times, and the chicken. What's the sounds of the chicken making noises? Does it look
Yeah.
like it's in distress?
You know, the chickens don't look. I'm not an expert on this, but the chickens don't look too much in distress while they're being held by their wings. I will say that many of them, there are reports of them dying before they even arrive to these rituals. They're malnourished and mistreated frequently. But there's quite a bit of squealing throughout the whole street. You can hear it. You don't know which chicken it's coming from. There's so many.
Oh, really? There's so many. This is happening, and many people. And so, is it like anybody who feels like the urge to get in there and do this, just pays the $12, gets a chicken, and does it?
Well, you know, I was wearing the kaputs, and I was told that I was not welcome there. So I would assume that it's reserved for the ultra-Orthodox.
When did they Oh, I see. So when did they decide you weren't welcome? At first, they welcomed you.
It wasn't a consensus decision. It was various youths telling me that.
They just saw through. They saw through you're some hippie
It
anarchist.
seems so.
Right. So tell me, what is your position on animal cruelty and these kind of things? Is that an issue of yours, or?
You know, I don't eat meat, so not entirely for animal cruelty, but also for climate change. Also, I'm not particularly Jewish, so to me it seems kind of unnecessary, reckless. It's a very reckless process, and it's very messy. And I believe that if they wanted to slaughter chickens for their ritual, then they maybe should have the right, but in significantly fewer numbers and in a sanitary way.
And you could do it with one chicken, for example, then eat it or something.
Exactly,
like that,
yeah,
right?
And that's an issue too. Is what happens to the chickens? The Jewish,
and of course, this is not the only religion that does things like this with animals. I've been in Egypt and saw how camels are treated. It was terrible. The Christians have been doing animal sacrifice forever and ever. This is unfortunately all too common that animals are as we were discussing earlier. The Bible says right at the beginning, God gives you dominion over all the creatures, right? Yeah. So as such, the Bible says it's okay. The Bible says a lot of screwed up things are okay. So that's one of them, right? And it's one of the problems, I think, maybe with the environment, where we have this idea it's sort of in our Judeo-Christian tradition, but it also is in other traditions as well, of dominating environment and nature.
Yes. Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. So these chickens, they slaughter them by cutting the neck, and this is actually a little bit brutal. What they do is they throw it into upside-down traffic cones that are like all laid out over a table. So they put them there to bleed out, and then they throw them into trash bags. And oftentimes the Jewish they say that the chickens are donated, but they're not slaughtered in a kosher manner, first of all. And there's videos and reports. If you go around in the day following one of these rituals around the neighborhood, you see chickens still on the ground. You find dumpsters full of dead chickens. All these things.
They're not meant to be eaten at all.
That's
not the purpose of this.
No, it's not. Absolutely not.
And they're not. They're just disposed of after the ritual.
Well, they say that they are donated for charity, but it seems that that's not the case.
Who would pluck them? I mean, you have to pluck those chickens and then cook them. It's like it's not easily done. Okay, it's all very interesting. We have a phone number, by the way. We're going to throw the phone number up on the screen. 212-757-1541. This is a live program. My guest, Alexander Rubinstein. Did I get it right?
That's right. Yeah.
All right. And he wrote an article for Italian magazine online. It's online. You can see it. We'll give you the information a little bit about this. What's the name of it again?
The Italian newspaper is La Voce de New York.
La Voce de New York, the Voice of New York.
Yes.
And the name of the ceremony that's done in
Kaporos.
Kaporos.
That's right.
All right. So we're talking about Kaporos. We're talking about this idea of the chicken being the place where one's sins are located, and then the chicken is then sacrificed in a way that has led some in the animal rights community to think is going over the top. And maybe. And what about the animal cruelty laws? I thought that New York City had animal cruelty laws.
We do have animal cruelty laws, and actually Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos, in their lawsuit against the rabbis and against the practice in general, the city departments that are sanctioning it, they cite 15 laws that are being violated, and many of them are animal cruelty laws. Others range from public nuisance, public health hazard, all these things, laws against child labor in slaughterhouses, laws against slaughterhouses even being erected on that specific street.
Why
where
child labor?
Well, many of the Jewish youth are employed in this. Maybe they're not paid, but it's part of the community, and they certainly participate.
Child labor is child labor. I mean,
exactly.
It doesn't matter if you're not paid. It's even worse, actually. Right? So interesting. So violation of all these rules and regulations. But were there police there?
They were. Yeah. The ritual was blocked off by barricades, and right across the street there was a big animal rights protest that included the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos.
I see. And so the police were protecting the ceremony from the protesters, separating the protesters from the ceremony, and allowing the ceremony to go on. There was no police.
That's right.
Did it look like to you as a reporter?
The police were not inside the ceremony.
Right, and it didn't look like there was anybody going up there and saying, we're going to write you a summons or arrest somebody.
No, none of that.
Why do you think that is?
Well, so this lawsuit that was raised in July, the judge, the Supreme Judge, what's her name? I forget. But the judge in the case, she said that the police have the discretion to enforce these laws or not enforce these laws, and that a private group could not sue for a public nuisance. So that was the finding of the case. So that was the preliminary injunction. The main case is ongoing, and they can appeal that ruling, but they were not able to stop the ritual this year.
Is this a recent, the idea of doing this, you said it was 2,000 years old?
Well, it was first mentioned in text over 1,000 years ago, but many say over 2,000, yes.
And so is it done in Israel and other
yes, it is done in Israel, yeah. And many Jewish faiths, they don't use chickens. They use a bag of coins, or many will plant seeds, and in the beginning of the month, and then come Yom Kippur, they use the little plant instead.
Oh, I see.
But it's done all over the Jewish world, yes.
Okay, it's done all over the Jewish world. However, in many communities, they've shied away from the idea of actually sacrificing these chickens.
Yes.
And in a way, this is like harkens back to sacrifice at the temple and all of that. Right?
Sure, yeah.
In a way, it's like that. But in a way, you don't really hear about, when you go to a synagogue, you don't see too much sacrifice going on in the back of the synagogue anymore. Those days are over, right? I grew up in New York. I never noticed that. So this is really hearkening back to ancient times, like pre-rabbinical almost.
Yes, and many rabbis have come out against the practice. Many are for it, sure, but many are against it.
Okay, because of the animal cruelty aspect of it. All right. So what do you think? What's your opinion about it? What do you think should be done?
Well, I think that there are many chickens being tortured every day in factory farms, and so it's a little bit suspicious that the Hasidic Jews are so fiercely targeted in this. However, the manner in which...
That's interesting. Wait a second. Let's stop there, and we'll go on.
Sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what do you mean by so many chickens are tortured? What do you mean by that?
Well, in many factory farms, the chickens don't even have places to lay eggs. They're on top of each other, literally. There's no space. There's feces all around. It's just very poor conditions. And this is a daily thing.
And this is what we eat
not
every
once
day.
A year.
Those meat eaters, those of us who eat chickens, whether it's chicken McNuggets or chicken from the store, little do they know.
Oh, you don't want to know about the McNuggets.
Well, I've seen that on television, so I know what they make them out of the whole chicken. Just throw it in. They would just get those dumpsters full of chickens and throw them in the factory, and McNuggets would come out the other side. I mean, we all know that, right? All right, and so and kids love it. Children love it.
Yeah.
Even when you tell them, I've seen television shows where they showed them how they were made and then served them, and they just shove them in their mouths, and they love them. What does it take? Is that we're going through it? What is it going to take, do you think? Well, continue on with the story, because I have so many questions, but go ahead.
So, I think that they should be allowed to continue the ritual, but I don't think that each individual who comes to New York for the practice should get their own chicken. I think maybe one per family or something like that. And I believe it should be indoors and much more sanitary.
And so it's sort of the craziness of it.
It's very chaotic.
Yeah, everybody grabbing a chicken and doing it.
And they're throwing chickens around after they, slice the neck, and it doesn't
blood
always.
Getting all over the place.
I got blood on my forehead. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So
you've been blooded at the check.
Bloodied, yes.
Right. That's amazing. So okay, great. So this is all very interesting. So what? Tell me, tell me more about your opinions about all of this. I find this fascinating. How did you, are you, we met through various people that we know in common, and
Sure.
I wondered, do you consider yourself an anarchist youth or a rebel, or are you with the group or whatever?
Well, I consider myself a leftist journalist, to put it lightly. But
Right.
yes, I'm a writer, and I'm interested in progressive politics and activism, and I take part and report.
So is this story something that you did because it was just another story and somebody assigned it to you, or is this something that you felt strongly about?
Well, it was both. Yeah, it was something I felt strongly about. I obviously think, like I said, I'm not a person of faith, so the whole ritual seemed very absurd to me. Also, it's just, like I said earlier, the idea of this very biblical practice occurring in the open streets of New York City was just fascinating and a little bit mind-blowing.
It is. So it's an ancient ceremony that's going on in the streets of New York, as if it was 2,000 years ago, or
Exactly.
Shtetl somewhere in Poland 1,000 years ago, or something like that. Right?
And it's not a highly publicized topic either. It's not something that many people don't know about it at all.
Well, yeah, I've heard about it, and vaguely, but I had no idea it was as big as you describe it. It was
right.
literally hundreds of people there?
Oh, more so. Thousands, yes.
Thousands, so there has to have been a lot of chickens. How do they get those chickens down here?
Well, the rabbis purchased them. They purchased 50,000 this year. 50,000, that's right.
50,000 chickens, and they kill every one of them?
I would assume so, yes. Although I saw a few of the animal rights protesters walking around with chickens.
They grab them. They save them. Really?
That's what I saw. I did not see any rescue operations in action, but I saw...
Some were rescued.
I believe so, yes.
How many do you think were rescued?
I couldn't tell you.
But you saw a couple?
Maybe like 2 or 3 I saw.
Really?
Yeah.
And what would you do with the chicken? You have to bring it home and raise it as your own?
Apparently. I don't think that's legal in New York.
Yeah, it's illegal to raise chickens. Wow, that's fascinating. Well, we laugh because we eat them. So many of us eat so many of them, and they're such the most popular food in America.
Yeah.
Chickens have replaced beef, and as you said, that's led to this factory farm situation where it's pretty disgusting. So I find this all very interesting, and now we're going to have to ask the rabbis to come on and to defend their point of view.
Okay.
If somebody wants to call, there's our number, 212-757-1541. I'm very curious what people think about this ancient medieval practice here. I mean, because the horse carriages, right, was such a when Mayor de Blasio claimed he was going to put an end to the horse carriages in Central Park, which many people have protested and saying the horses are mistreated and maltreated, and that in the heat of the day and in the traffic it's the wrong place for horses, and yet no matter what the mayor or all the opponents do, they're unable to change those laws, and in fact these horses are still carrying tourists. They're very, very popular. They make a lot of money. They employ some people, and they carry tourists up and down the street. So obviously it's not the only, this chicken thing is not the only circumstance in New York where animals are being mistreated and where there's some opposition, but yet the opposition, as strong as I thought it was, is not strong enough to stop it.
No. It's there's ongoing lawsuits against them, but it will take time, and it'll be interesting to see how it goes next year, because I don't think that the Orthodox are going to exactly follow the rules if they're told that they cannot.
In other words, it would be like illegally done. It would be underneath the surface.
I mean, I can't say for sure, but it is a ritual which they hold very dearly. They were
what
very
I'm getting.
passionate about it.
It is, yeah. I can
Yeah.
get that. That's what I don't understand. I guess there's a real deep passion. Where do you know where that passion comes from? Were you able to talk to anybody? And
I was, yeah. Actually, one encounter that I witnessed, there was one of the animal rights protesters, and she was a member of PETA, and she was speaking to one of the Jewish boys, and she was saying that you can use a bag of coins. Your God doesn't want you to cause suffering. Use a bag of coins, but to him, the bag of coins is meaningless. He says, no, but it's for God. It's a gift to God. So, I think that's where it comes from, is that they believe that, this is actually, something which pleases God and which absolves themselves. So it's very dear, and it's thousands of years old. So of course, they're not wanting to let it go so easily.
I see. That's very interesting. So, how many people were at the protest, do you think?
At the protest, maybe 60 or so, maybe more.
Right.
But
it was mostly PETA organized. Was it like
no? It was organized by the Alliance to End Chickens as Kaporos, but most of them belong to other groups such as PETA. Yeah.
Right. So, okay. So, do you don't see any change in this? This is going to happen next year and the year after?
Well, it depends on how the lawsuit turns out. It'll be certainly in the spotlight again next year, I think. It went unnoticed for a very long time. It wasn't until the lawsuit in July that really people started taking videos and publicizing.
Why do you think there's an interest all of a sudden? Because I'd heard about it, but you're right. It seems for the first time we're having a show about it and talking about it. Why is that, do you think?
I don't know for sure. I think social media and websites like change.org, which try to have these large-scale petitions. They play a part in all of this.
Oh, and there was a petition on
There
Change
was,
against
I
this?
believe so, yes.
I see. Do you know how many signatures it got?
I don't. I'm sorry.
Look that up. But okay, Alexander Rubinstein, tell us a little bit about your article, where we can find it, how we can read more about it.
Well, you can find it, and also the video I took on my website. It's called wordout.nyc.
Wordout.nyc.
It's the top story. So it's also published on the Italian newspaper La Voce di New York. Wordout.nyc is a new project of myself and a few of my friends, and it's kind of like a gonzo-style, AP-style journalism where we just go into these activist situations and we say what happens, whether the cops are doing something they shouldn't be, or whether it's the protesters that are doing something we shouldn't be. We kind of report on that. So.
Do you have anything you're focusing on next? Any news stories or anything?
I have a few things coming out.
What are some? Can you tease us a little bit?
So every Monday there's a sustained protest called People's Monday, and they highlight a different instance of police brutality each week. They give a little demonstration at Grand Central, have a die-in, I believe. I haven't attended yet, but I hear about it, and that's coming up. We're going to cover that.
All right. Okay, great. And anything else you'd like to add? We have a minute left. Any messages? As a journalist looking back on the experience of writing this article, what would you have for young journalists out there looking for stories? And
I would say,
what did you learn from this?
I would say if you hear something that's a little odd, jump into it, because you have nothing to lose, and you could have a very good story to gain.
Right, and this seems like a very good story. I mean, I really haven't seen anything written about this in a long time.
And it was just very simple. I went there, I got off the train, and I was there, and I got to see this whole practice that's so highly controversial. There's been 2 lawsuits against the practice, one in California, one in New York City this year alone.
And it goes on in California too.
Oh yeah, Detroit as well. Yes, I was just reading that the Jews put a pro-Kaporos lawsuit out against the city. So in Detroit, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. All right.